What's up YouTube? It's Nerdy, and welcome back to the Transmissions Draft League. Today we are taking a look at our matchup for week number 6 versus the Cretaceous Draco Meteors. So this is a cross-divisional game. We are playing against one of the stronger teams in the light division. They currently hold the 3rd seed. And actually, I believe after 5 weeks, we actually hold the same record and differential as them. Of course, our season started off a little bit more rocky, and we've picked up since then. And the Draco Meteors have kind of been on the opposite trajectory of being undefeated and then losing 2 in a row. So we're hoping to continue the narrative for the season so far, where we have started rough and then trending upwards, and then our opponent starting to trend downwards. Obviously, this is a really tough game. I'm going to go a little bit in depth about the team that we have for this week, but I did make a team building video, which should have come out by the time that you are watching this video. So hopefully you did enjoy that, but I'll talk about the team and what kind of changes we did make. So first up, we have our Hariyama. Hariyama's kind of been the MVP for the Bewears so far, and I think has definitely been our best Pokemon throughout the season. It's been absolutely integral in 2 of our game wins, and I think it's been completely disrespected by a lot of our opponents, and has kind of proven that it is arguably the best Pokemon on our team. For this week, we are running super aggressive. We're Flame Orb Guts because our opponent does have Sacred Fire Entei, which can burn us, so we want to be able to ignore that. There was an argument for Thick Fat because, again, they do have fire and ice type damage that Hariyama could potentially shrug off. But Hariyama's already pretty bulky as is, so we don't really need that help that much. But between Terra Ground, Headlong Rush, and just very powerful close combats, Hariyama can start scoring one-hit KOs, and it's very disruptive for our opponent to have to deal. It kind of forces Terras out early, which is something that our next Pokemon, Talonflame, benefits from a lot. And Talonflame, of course, is here to set Tailwind because Hariyama is slow compared to our opponent's team, but with a Tailwind can outspeed just about everything. And then with a Will-O-Wisp, because our opponent has a very physical team, especially if we force the Entei to Terra, we can start spreading burns around, which makes it very easy for the rest of our team to just deal out consistent damage here and there. On top of that, Brave Bird also pretty solid against the Ogerpon. We just hit it hard enough with a Terra Flying Brave Bird to OHKO that Pokemon, but honestly, what we prefer to do is burn that Pokemon instead. Because we do always outspeed the Ogerpon, we want to try and burn that Pokemon, try and get it to use its Terra early so that because even after a Terra Water, if that Pokemon is burned, we still do live that Ivy Cudgel thanks to the amount of bulk investment that we have. And then we can start being really annoying with some quick guard shenanigans to help keep our lower health Pokemon alive. After that, we have our own Ogerpon. Cornerstone is actually really solid in this matchup. There's no Pokemon on our opponent's team that resists both Horn Leech and Ivy Cudgel. And so what this does is it allows us to just fire off really powerful Ivy Cudgels and Horn Leeches to really threaten our opponent. Further, if our opponent is running Ogerpon with that Terra Water, Horn Leech becomes even more valuable as it can potentially OHKO that Pokemon with a maximum roll. Unfortunately, we would need Adamant to guarantee that move getting the KO, but it is important to at least force a speed tie between those 2 Pokemon, as our opponent's Ogerpon always has a super effective move, or at least a really powerful neutral move into us with their own Ivy Cudgel, something that we don't have just by nature of being a rock type. But that being said, rock type Ivy Cudgel hits our opponent's team really hard, so in a scenario where our opponent's team is worn down or burned all the way through, Cornerstone can come in and really just wreck shop. And on top of that, having Sturdy does mean that we can shrug off at least one powerful hit. And Follow Me also allows us to keep a Pokemon like Hariyama safe, which is, as we saw in the last game, very valuable. Next up, we have Iron Crown. This is the predicted best Pokemon on our team, and I think based on actual strength, is the best Pokemon on our team. It just hasn't been as powerful because our opponents heavily prepare for it, but I do think that it still has a lot of play here in this match. We're running booster speed on this Iron Crown with a lot of special attack investment, just 1 point lower than our speed so that we still get that speed boost. But same as Hariyama, we are Terra Ground. It's mostly for that Raging Bolt in this case though, as we want to be able to hit that Pokemon really hard, and when Psychic Terrain is not up, be able to dodge things like the Thunderclap. Expanding Force is obviously really strong. Our opponent does have a Dark type and lots of Snarl to spread around, so on the surface this isn't as powerful. But the big deal is with a booster speed, as long as Chien-Pao is not getting any sort of speed boost item or Tailwind wise, we can outspeed and always OHKO that Pokemon with Tachyon Cutter, which is also really nice. We also have Indeedee with the Rocky Helmet here. Like I said, our opponent's team is extremely physically offensive, so having the ability to force those Pokemon to attack into Indeedee and hit themselves, hopefully with that Rocky Helmet chip, is really nice. We are super physically bulky, which allows us to live some of these really powerful attacks. We need Terra Fairy in order to really wall out certain Pokemon such as Chien-Pao, but otherwise we can live at least one hit. The other thing to remember about Chien-Pao, by the way, is that it does get Ice Spinner, and while Ice Spinner is preferred for a lot of our other Pokemon because it doesn't hit as hard, Ice Spinner does have the secondary effect of removing terrain, so if we do have a scenario where we're going up against that Pokemon, removing the terrain can be an issue if we are relying on that Expanding Force. But of course we also have Dazzling Gleam, which does 2-hit KO that Pokemon if it chooses to not Terra and sits in front of Indeedee. So although it might threaten Indeedee, Indeedee does threaten it back very sufficiently. And our final Pokemon is Alcremie. If you watch the team building video, this is a change from what our Pokemon was last time. We did have Reuniclus in this slot before. The truth is although bringing Trick Room against our opponent can be okay, it still does lose to a lot of the same things that Iron Crown would have otherwise, and doesn't have a secondary stab to really try and force through. So the idea with Alcremie here is that if our opponent is a little bit less prepared, or if we need a change up, we can lead Alcremie and Iron Crown, and because Iron Crown does have that speed boost, we do threaten Pokemon like Chien-Pao before they can move, allowing us to get a lot of space so that Alcremie can side decorate, and Iron Crown, when it has a speed boost and a +2 special attack stat, kind of just ends the game. It has just enough damage to get through just about everything. Of course, Pokemon like Assault Vest, Corviknight can live the onslaught. But the idea here is that our opponent really doesn't have a fast way through Iron Crown except for a Pokemon like Chien-Pao. And so between Charm and Burn from Talonflame, we can really mitigate that Pokemon's damage. And also because Iron Crown is faster, we at least force the Chien-Pao to Terra if it wants to survive the Tachyon Cutter. And then of course, once we get to +2, there is very little in the way that can actually stop Iron Crown. So that is the team that we are bringing. Let's go ahead and get into the match, and good luck to our opponent. Alright, we have made it into the match, so let's see what our opponent brought. Kind of a combination that I was really expecting here. The only Pokemon left behind that I might have expected to be here is something like Passimian. But other than that, top 5 Pokemon are all here, and then Barraskewda. Barraskewda can be a little bit of an issue as it does outspeed a Pokemon like Talonflame. But let's see what sets our opponent brought. So we have a Focus Sash Chien-Pao with Terra Stellar, Crunch Ice Spinner, and Psychic Fangs, so no priority there. Psychic Fangs, of course, probably to hit something like the Hariyama. And we also have Assault Vest Entei with Terra Grass, something that we definitely did prepare for, but it is without Snarl, as it seems. Our opponent also brought the Ogerpon Wellspring with a very standard set there. We have a Raging Bolt booster energy, no protect, notably. Our opponent does have double electric move in Thunderbolt and Thunderclap, and Dragon Pulse and Calm Mind. And we have a clear Amulet Barraskewda with Propeller Tear. They are also Terra Stellar, and they have Liquidation Drill Run and Close Combat. And then finally, our opponent did also bring the Corviknight with the Citrus Berry Mirror Armor, of course, in order to stop something like the Squawkabilly. And it is also Terra Steel, looking like they want that Iron hit to hit a little bit harder. I mean, a lot of things can go right and a lot of things can go wrong for us at the beginning of this game here. Biggest thing to point out is that there are a couple of Pokemon on our opponent's team that don't have Protect, namely Raging Bolt and Entei. Two Pokemon that can be an issue for us if we are not careful. Initially, the strategy that I want to go for is the one that we prep for in advance. Hariyama is really solid into our opponent's team, and that should not change with how our opponent's team is set up. However, I don't want to discredit the power of Iron Crown in lead here. Iron Crown actually, because of the way that our opponent's team is set up, especially with this Sash Chenpao having Terra Stellar, does mean that we are set up for a lot of success here. The lead that I want to go for is Hariyama Talonflame. It's pretty solid into just about everything. The only things that can really give us issues there are the Raging Bolt in lead, and even that Pokemon doesn't like to see that we are Terra Ground Headlong Rush. In the back, of course, we are going to have the Cornerstone because it is really good at cleaning up our opponent's team. But I also really like Iron Crown in the back here. Iron Crown with the booster speed does allow us to outspeed everything on our opponent's team because they do not have any speed boosting items here. And it allows us to clean up our opponent's team just like the Ogerpon would do, even without the benefit of Tailwind. So I think we are going to pick Iron Crown as our final Pokemon. The last thing that I want to check is, of course, the Adamant Chenpao with the Psychic Fangs versus our Hariyama. No Psychic Terrain up. Psychic Fangs actually does have a role to KO. We are a little bit more bulky than that, so we actually do have the ability to live even Adamant Chenpao. So we should be good about that in lead, and of course we can also fire a Fake Out off in that first turn. So let's go ahead and pick our last Pokemon. Let's see what our opponent wants to lead here. It is the Chenpao and the Corviknight, so pretty big lead there for them. Honestly, we're in pretty good shape here. Both of our opponent's Pokemon do have Protect. Let me see how the Corviknight stacks up. I'm going to look at a fairly offensive Corviknight set versus our Hariyama. And they do not have a damage boosting item. However, that Brave Bird is capable of taking that knockout. However, if they are burned, that does not happen. So we are in a really good spot there. The other thing to mention here, of course, is that with the Sword of Ruin up, our Close Combat actually does have the ability to KO non-bulky Corviknight, and even bulky Corviknight still looks like it actually does have a role to get knocked out there. So I think for the sake of making sure that we take a little bit less damage here, and let's make sure that this Pokemon is burned. Let's go ahead and go for a Terra Ground Fake Out into the Chenpao, and here I'm going to go ahead and go for the Will-O-Wisp into the Corviknight. So let's see, it is Protect from the Chenpao, which does block our Fake Out. Will-O-Wisp does connect on the Corviknight, who goes for Brave Bird into Talonflame here, and it does a relatively small amount. Alright, now we are in a pretty good spot here, I'd say. We have a lot of options here. Of course, we can burn the Chen Pao here. We can yeah, so that Brave Bird did about 40%. So yeah, this is the more offensive Corviknight. And let's go ahead and bring up Chen Pao here. Chen Pao with the Ice Spinner does have a roll to knock us out. Unfortunately, though, yeah, so we have a ton of different options here. We are 90 speed, so the chances of us being able to outspeed this Corviknight are fairly high. I think the play that I want to make here is I'm going to go ahead and close combat the Corviknight. And then here we have an answer for the Chen Pao in the back, so let's go ahead and just click Tailwind here. It is the Ogerpon that actually chooses to switch in here while close combat connects and takes out the Corviknight, clearing a lot of space here for our team. Chen Pao going to hit the board once again. Once again, we're in a pretty solid position here, I'd say. Let's go ahead and protect our Hariyama, as I think it's drawing a lot of ire from our opponent. And let's go ahead and click Will-O-Wisp into this Ogerpon. It should very much neuter that Pokemon. Protect does come out as Will-O-Wisp does connect with the Ogerpon. Ice Spinner hits into the Protect, as Ivy Cudgel does actually take out our Talonflame after the Terra Water. I think here, let's go ahead and bring in our Cornerstone here. Here, I'm going to actually go ahead and click, let's bring up Ogerpon here. Wellspring. This is going to be a bulkier support set versus our Hariyama. Close combat does knock it out, thanks to the help of Sword of Ruin. So we should be able to go ahead and click close combat into that slot there. And then here, I'm actually just going to click Spiky Shield. This keeps our sturdy intact, which is obviously really nice. Crunch does come out, lowering our defense again, as close combat's going to go ahead and take out the Ogerpon here. And we will reveal our opponent's final Pokemon. It is, in fact, the Entei. So now we can go ahead and click Headlong Rush and Ivy Cudgel here. Obviously, we want to be able to take out this Entei, as we do have an answer for the Chen Pao, as the Ivy Cudgel actually just going to one-hit KO that Pokemon. Tailwind going to expire here as we reveal Iron Crown, and it is the speed booster, so our Tachyon Cutter will be able to take that Pokemon out with a pretty clean victory in Game 1. Like I said, pretty clean victory for game number 1 there. We are definitely in the lead there. I think this is honestly a really great spot for us to consider our change-up plan of side decorate on the Iron Crown. And I think that because our opponent has to really consider changing up their game plan, I think that's what we're going to go for here. In our last slot, I think it's really reasonable to bring our Hariyama still. I think, though, I am going to value the Cornerstone, as we did see that it guaranteed knocks out our opponent's Entei. So let's go ahead and pick that as our final Pokemon. Let's see what our opponent does to adjust. It is the Ogerpon and the Chen Pao actually in lead. So this is a pretty good spot for us here, of course. We can go ahead and click the Tachyon Cutter into the Chen Pao here and side decorate. Because we know that we are faster than the Chen Pao, that Pokemon cannot stick around or has to protect, and Ogerpon cannot KO either Pokemon here. Terra Water going to come out, as Tachyon Cutter is going to take out the Chen Pao. that Pokemon goes down as Ivy Cudgel fails to KO as we side decorate, giving us a very powerful boost there. Now let's go ahead and bring up Iron Crown with the speed booster. No more Suit of Ruin up with Psychic Terrain up and +2. Expanding Force should KO even a Terra Water. Actually, it's just shy of KOing. Let's bring up Corviknight. This is the more offensive set. Actually, Expanding Force still does a ton of damage here. And that Corviknight is unable to actually take us out. Let's see how much the Ogerpon will do. Bulkier support set. That Ivy Cudgel will hurt quite a bit. Let's go ahead and go for Protect here, as definitely we are drawing a lot of attention here. And I'm actually just going to go for a Charm here. Ivy Cudgel hits into the Protect. Brave Bird will finally take out that Pokemon though, as now we can go ahead and bring in Indeedee. And let's go ahead and just click the Expanding Force here. No need to complicate this, and let's go ahead and go for a Helping Hand, as Helping Hand Expanding Force does guarantee to take out that Pokemon and should also take out the Corviknight. Helping Hand comes out, takes out both Pokemon, and leaves our opponent in a 3 versus 1. In a really tough spot, we can go ahead and just go for another Helping Hand and Expanding Force and sweep our opponent's team with a very clean 2-0 victory. GG's for game. GG's to our opponent there. Really tough loss for them, and kind of shows the absolute terror that is our team, as we win in 2 completely different ways with 2 completely different Pokemon. And yeah, now your Bewears are in a absolutely dominant position, and this actually guarantees us the number 2 seed for the playoffs. So we made it, and we are in a great spot for playoffs. We got one more game to play before we get there, so I hope to see you in there. Thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.